Good evening and welcome back to our weekly question and answer series for anash.org. Question: you make a berche shechiuni when you have a baby girl, and can you make it in the Svira days? The Alter Rebbe writes inside the Berche Sanhenen that when a person has a baby girl, when he sees her the first time, he makes a berche shechiuni. And this is basically mentioned in the Sheikh also of the Besi Yosef, and we don't see anywhere that we do not make this berche shechiuni. This is a bracha which says in Chazal and Sheikh, the Alter Rebbe brings it down, and yes, we make this bracha when you see the first time your baby Dora. Now the question is, can you make it in the Svira take, in the days of Svira? In Sefer HaMonogim, the Rebbe writes that we don't make a berche shechiuni in the Svira days. Shabbos you could make a bracha, but during the Svira days, in the weekdays, we don't make a shechionu. But that's only on a thing which you don't need to make a shechionu. That means a new fruit, or a new dress, or a new suit, clothing when you make a shechionu. This you don't need to put on, you don't need to eat the fruit, so therefore you don't make a shechionu. You try to avoid not to make a shechionu. But when it comes to a shechionu which you have to make because that's the time when you have to do it, of course you make the shechionu. For instance, a person makes a pidyon aben in the Svira days. He has to make a shechionu, because that's not a thing which you could avoid. It's a thing which you need to do, and if you don't do it now, you cannot do it. So therefore, you can make a shechionu. This is what the Mishnah Berurah brings down in Simma Tuf Tzadi Gimel in the name of the Mama Matcha, and the kavanah is even the people who are machmer not to make a shechionu on the Svira days, because there are some people who are not makpet on this, and they do make shechionu even on fruit in the Svira days. But our meaning goes according, like the poskim who say that you shouldn't make a shechionu in the Svira days. But even this poskim agree that whenever you have to make a shechionu for a pidyon aben, etc., you make the bracha. So when it comes to our question, you see the first time your baby girl, and it's the only time you could make a shechionu. Yes, you can make this shechionu even in the Svira days. Question: are you allowed to trim your mustache? And what is considered a mustache? And what is the Binig Chabad and the Rabbayim about this? According to the Zohar and the Mekibalim, there is a hider and midas chasidus that a person should cut and trim his mustache. That means it shouldn't be overly growing. There's a lot of reasons of it. According to the Zohar, the place above around the mouth has to be free of any hair. So therefore, whenever the mustache grows overly big, there is an inyan that you should cut it. Other poskim say because when you eat milchiks and you might stay some milk or cheese sticked on and you don't see it, and then you're going to eat fleishiks, meat product, and there's a problem of basar b'cholov. So we see, according to halacha, it is not a problem, and according to the Zohar, it is not only it's not a problem, there is some kind of inyan, and we see that the Arizal, the holy Arizal, used to cut his mustache whenever it grew and it bothered him of eating. That means whenever it's so big that it doesn't let you eat, you could cut it. And this, by the way, you could cut also in the days of Svira, because that's something which bothers you to eat. So that's the shittas of Zohar, Bala Mekabolim, and Poiskim. Regarding Mנהג Chabad, there's a letter from the Rebbe in Igris Kodesh Heilig Yites, page 422, Tuf Chof Beis, which somebody asked the Rebbe this question, and the Rebbe answers like this: any question regarding cutting your mustache, since I did not hear any clearly guidance on this, and there are reasons to both sides, yes to cut and not to cut. So the Rebbe answers him, you should ask in Bimavar what's the Mנהג Chabad, and you should ask the Rabbonei Chabad and see what they do, and whatever they do, you could do. And that's Masarav. So from the Rebbe we don't have clear guidance if you should cut it or you should not cut it. And the Rebbe says, look around, see if Mנהג Chabad is and what Rabbonei Chabad is, and this is what you could do. So to answer your question, what is the Mנהג Chabad? You gotta ask the Rabbonei Anash and see what people do. And I can tell you, some people do cut it, some people don't cut it. So again, you don't have a clear guidance, and it's both sides has reasoning, and you can do if it bothers you and it doesn't let you eat. There is a good reason to cut it, but just to cut it when it doesn't bother to eat, then you should not cut it. Question: in order to wash your hands with soap on Shabbos, it needs to be very watered down. What if I am in a place that only has regular soap? Is there any way that I could use it? The answer to this is, you have one option. You can take the soap and soak it and put it into a glass of water till it dissolves, and then you can use it. You cannot use it when it's hard, but you could put it into water and wait it should dissolve, and then you could use it. And the marmukim is the Lektzess HaShulchan. The Lektzess HaShulchan is Sima Kif Mem Vov. Bada HaShulchan Sifkut Lamed Bais writes that there's not a problem to put in soap when it dissolves in the water. We know that you cannot take a thing which is hard and break it down and dissolve it with your hands, because that goes in the problem of noilet. So take it and dissolve it with your hands, you have a problem. When it's hard, you might have also a problem of mamarach. But when you take it, you put it into the water and it dissolves by itself, it does not go into this problem of noilet, and you could use it on Shabbos. Now, not everybody agrees with this psak. Some poskim do not agree with it, but akaponim the Lektzess HaShulchan writes that you could do it. So therefore, if a person is in a place which he needs to use soap, now when we're still in the pandemic and he doesn't have any other soap, he could rely on the Lektzess HaShulchan and put it into the water, wait a few minutes till it dissolves by itself, and then he could use the soap water. Question: can one give a chol of stam product to other Jews that eat them? The answer to this question is no, you cannot give this for someone else. Why? Because you don't eat chol of akim. It's a nice way to say chol of stam, but basically it's chol of akim, which you didn't have. A Jew should be there when they milked the milk. So since you are not going to eat it because you hold that it's also to eat, and you don't rely on all the hatayrim, you hold that me'ikar adin, you cannot eat it. And the poskim write that whenever you don't eat the food because you hold it's non-kosher me'ikar adin, so there's a isser of lifnei iva to give it to someone else. If a person holds it is kosher, but you want to be machmar, you want to have a better hechsher, you want to rely on more chumras, so then you could give it for someone else which doesn't rely on all the chumras. But when a person doesn't eat it because he holds, like the shittas, that it's also to eat, so then you cannot give it to someone else, because if you hold that it's also to eat, when you give it for someone else, you're over of the Isur of Lifnei Iver. You can see in Chivas Ksaf Soifer, a Yeridaya Siman Ayin Zayin, he has a talk about this, and also in Chivas Shaivet HaKohosi, Chaylik Aleph Siman Ayin Hai. So again, whenever you don't do it only because of a chimra, you could give it for someone else. Whenever you don't do it because you hold that, like the poiskim, that you cannot eat it, then you cannot give it for someone else. Since Chol of Akim, we don't eat Me'ikra Din, so therefore you cannot give it for someone else, even though that he relies on the poiskim which say that you could eat it. Question: when is the right time to take your child in chayder, achnosis la chayder, after the upsherinish? The Rebbe writes in the letters in Igris Kodesh Chayli Gimel, page 407, Umat Tov Zayin, that once the minhag used to be that you only took your child in chayder only when he became 5 years old. That means upsheren and taking to cheder not necessarily go together. You cut the hair and make payas when it becomes 3, but taking him to cheder you can do afterwards too. And that used to be the minhag at 5. But in the Kinteras Heicha Manachem, Cheli Gimel, page Reish Mem Zayin, 247, over there it brings that the Rebbe said for Rabbi Yaslavsky that Rabbi Sein and Nisi'eni used to tell B'derech Klal that you should take your child in cheder when you are 3 years old. And this is also what it is stated in Sichas Kodesh Tafshin Mi and Beis Chaylik Aleph Omer 343, that you should do it when you're 3 years old. So to answer your question, when is the ideal time, the right time to take your child to cheder the first time and do all the menugim of taking to cheder, you should do it when he turns 3 years old and not wait till he is 5. Now, for sure, when you are in such a situation that you can make payers, but you cannot take him to cheder, if there's a lockdown or whatever reason, then you could push it off. But the ideal thing is to take him right when he turns 3 years old. Question: what is the correct bracha on schnitzel when the frying it with breadcrumbs? This is a very good question. People make meat and they cover it with matzah meal, breadcrumbs. What bracha do you make? Because the meat is a shahakol. The crumbs is a mezoinas. So the halacha is that when a person has a thing which is a iker and a tofel, that means a thing which is the main thing, and a thing which is not the main thing, you make the bracha on the iker and you don't make a bracha on the tofel. But if it is a mezoinas is always stronger, the strongest thing, and if you have even a drop of mezoinas which you put into the food, if you put in flour, any flour which is a mezoinas, you put it into a cheesecake. It depends. If you put it in because you want to have the taste, although it's a drop, you are going to make a berachas mezoinas, because mezoinas has a very chshivas, and if you put it into any food, even though it's a drop, and so to speak, it should be it's a tufel, but since it is made also to give taste, therefore it is a mezoinas. If you put it in not because you want to taste, only because it should glue together the cake, that means you're putting it in sometimes in a cheesecake, only it should make that the cheesecake should stick together, or sometimes you put in flour into gefilte fish in order it should stick together. It's not made for taste. So then it is the bracha what it is. That means if it's a shahakl, a cheesecake is shahakl, or fish is shahakl, you make a shahakl, you don't make an amazonis. Now, when you take breadcrumbs and you put it on a schnitzel, there's a big machlokas hachroinam what bracha to make. Some poskim say that you make a shahakl. Why? Because they hold the main thing is the meat. The main thing is the meat and not the main thing is the meat and not the crumbs. And therefore you make a shahakl. That means when you have a schnitzel, you could eat the meat by itself, but nobody eats the cover, the tzipi, the breadcrumbs on their own. So therefore, they hold that you should make only a shahakl. Another reason why they hold you should make a shahakl, since they feel that the main thing is why you're putting it on top of it is in order it should fry good and shouldn't get burned. But it's not. The ikar is not, the main thing is not for the taste. It gives a taste, but it's not made for the taste. It's only made that it shouldn't burn the piece of meat. So therefore, they hold it should make a shahakl. Other poskim say no, since it is made also to give some kind of taste, and it gives a taste, so therefore, you make a berches mazoines, because as I mentioned before, whenever there's a shahakl and mazoines, although the main thing is shahakl and the tofel is mazoines, you're still making a mazoines. And this is mashpa from the Alter Rebbe in Sima Kiv Samaches Sifid Aleph. It comes out like that on a schnitzel you should make a mazoines. But since there is a machlokas aposkim, a big machlokas, even in the Alter Rebbe there is also some which do not agree 100% that it is a mazoines. So therefore the ideal thing is in such a way that you should make a piece, you should make a mazoines on something else, on a pretzel or on a piece of cake, and make a shahakl on something else which is a shahakl, and then you could eat the schnitzel. Or you could eat first a piece of meat. From the schnitzel you take out the piece of meat, and then you could make the mazoines. Because even according to the Alter Rebbe, if we hold that the Alter Rebbe holds that schnitzel is a mazoines because of the covering, which is a mazoines, but the halach is even by ikar and tufel, if a person eats first the tufel, he can make a bracha on the tufel. When you eat it together, or when you make first a bracha on the ikar, then you don't make a bracha on the tufel anymore. But you could eat first the tufel, make a bracha, and then eat the ikar. So when it comes to our case, in order to go out of all the sveikas, you should take a piece of meat, make a shahakl, and then you could make a mazoines on the covering. But the ideal thing and the best thing is to take separate shahakl and mazoines, because if we hold that schnitzel is a shahakl, you cannot make then a mazoines on the covering. So the ideal thing will be take a piece of mazoines, take a piece of shahakl, and then you can eat the schnitzel without any problems. Question. While making a shechianu on a new fruit, which bracha do you make first? The bracha on the fruit or the shechianu? Now, the Alter Rebbe writes clearly inside the Berches Sanhenim, Perig Yud Aleph, Sif Yud Beis, that you first make a shechianu, and then you make the bracha by the Pri Eitz or by the Pri Adumo on the fruit which you're going to eat. So that answers the question. First you make the shechianu, and then you make the bracha on the fruit. Why is it? And the reason is why the Alter Rebbe gives the reason, because truly a person when he sees a new fruit, he can make already a bracha shechianu, only by seeing the fruit. But since the minhag is that we don't make the bracha only when you eat it, But that's the minhag. The minhag is we don't make it when we see it, we only make it when we eat it. But since, according to halacha, if a person sees a new fruit and has simcha, he can make the שהחיינו then. So since the berach שהחיינו came before the berachas hachila, because the berach שהחיינו came right when you saw it, and only when you're eating it, then you make the berachas on the fruit. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, whenever you're going to make a שהחיינו on a fruit, you should make first the שהחיינו, and only afterwards you should make the bracha on boire priyuaitz. Okay, good night, and have a wonderful week, and please join us next week and send in your questions to inbox@anash.org.